Happy Father's Day
Yes.
to all of you. Dads, that was a nice treat having Shannon read for us today. Recently graduated. Shannon Hampton, recently employed, from what I understand. Congratulations. I want to tell you for a minute what a neat thing it is to see somebody grow up in the Lord, isn't it? Isn't it awesome? I mean, I look around and all the kids that are here and all the kids that are active, and to see them growing and doing things and making good choices and moving on in their life. Shannon, we're very proud of you. We're excited for your new opportunity.
Amen.
We hope that we're glad you chose Atlanta, not New York, because it's a lot closer. And we hope that you come back often and visit. And that's a treat for a dad to see their kids moving in life and growing in life. It's awesome. It's really awesome. It's Father's Day. I'm trying to get Jim to cry. That's all I'm trying to do. It is Father's Day.
Next week, yeah.
It is Father's Day. It's a tremendous day to celebrate the guys in our life that have had an impact on our life. We'll get into that in a minute. But there was a neat story Robert Lewis wrote in his book, Real Family Values. And he tells a fascinating story about a remarkable, heartwarming discovery that workers in the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, Ohio made in the winter of 1993. They were renovating a section of the museum, and they found a photograph that had been hidden under the crevice of a display case. The man in the picture had a bat resting on his shoulder, and he was wearing a uniform, and the word said Sinclair Oil printed across his chest. His demeanor was gentle and friendly. Stapled to the picture was a note, scribbled in pen by an adoring fan, and the note said this. It said, "You were never too tired to play ball. On your days off, you helped build the Little League field. You always came to watch me play. You were a Hall of Fame dad. I wish I could share this moment with you, your son, Pete." Isn't that beautiful? Somehow, some guy named Pete managed to slip a picture of his dad into the Baseball Hall of Fame because he was a Hall of Fame kind of dad. I think this morning I'd like to talk to us what it takes to be a Hall of Fame kind of dad. Now, Sheila reminded us, and I know that your church calendar tells you that today is Trinity Sunday. And I know that most of you came here today yearning for a deep theological treatise on the meaning of the Trinity. But doesn't the doctrine of the Trinity say to us, among other things, that the very first Hall of Fame dad was gone? Amen. I mean, after all, the first two persons of the Trinity in traditional religious language is Father and Son, right? Today is Father's Day, and we salute you dads. We love you. The role of a Christian father is more important in today's world than ever before, don't you think? Amen. How imperative is it that we, as Christian fathers, begin to undo the bad rap that dads everywhere have gotten? And dads have gotten a bad rap, and you know what? A lot of it is deserved. I mean, think about it for a minute. How many sitcoms do you watch, television shows, where that they either have a father that is completely absent, or if there is a dad in the sitcom, what is he? He's just a complete buffoon and messes up everything all the time, often causing more problems for the family. I love Peter Griffin, but Family Guy, I mean, you know, the dad is the worst character in the show. He doesn't do anything right. You know, it's interesting to me how often motherhood is celebrated and fatherhood is despised, specifically as a society in general. I once saw an advertisement in a particular magazine for Father's Day, and it had an acrostic on the word for father. It read, F is for your favorite occupation, and then there was a picture of a man sleeping in a chair. A for the anniversaries you blew. Mother is shown waiting in the van for father to come home for their anniversary dinner. T is for the talk in your sparkling conversation. Dad is depicted as reading a newspaper while the children and wife are talking to him. H is for the helpful things you do. Dad is shown poking a ladder through a window. E is for each time you were forgetful. This shows a father leaving the pregnant mother standing at the front of the house while dashing off to the hospital. R stood for the recitals you attended. And it's the cartoon shows Dad being literally drugged to his child's piano recital. And the ad concluded by saying this. It said, "He may not be a perfect father, but he does deserve a perfect gift. So give him an arrow shirt for Father's Day." As a father, how would you like to be remembered? A man once said that as a child, he was terribly afraid of his father. He was a pretty awesome figure, he said. When he spoke, and that was the end of things. I always imagined if I could hear the voice of God, it would sound like the voice of my father. Now, even though this man did not intend to compliment his father, I guess he should have been congratulated for connecting his father to God in any kind of way, even if it was a negative connotation. And yet, in the book of Proverbs, what do we read? We read these words. It says, "Children, hear the instruction of your father. He is the wisdom of God speaking to you."
Wow.
Now, that's quite an order for dad, isn't it? A huge responsibility that's been placed upon you. You are to be the voice and wisdom of God in your family. Now, I wonder how many fathers today are filling the bill. How are we fathers doing? Well, I think we're failing on a lot of counts, at least as a society in general. If you want proof of the failure of the American father, I present you several pieces of evidence. First, Mother's Day is celebrated as a church festival. People who never dust a pew on any other Sunday during the year will many times get out on Mother's Day. As one man put it, he said, "Yeah, Mom sure gets quite a bang out of it when we all go to church with her on that day." Secondly, if you got your dad a card on Father's Day, the likelihood of it having anything religious on it is very remote. Most likely it'll have a picture of a pipe or a golf club or a fishing pole or someone bringing home the bacon or something like that. In fact, I defy anyone to say that Father's Day, either as a secular holiday or as it's celebrated in the church, is as big of a deal as Mother's Day. It's not. And there are other evidences. If you were to take a comparison of the men's group versus the women's group in any church in America, I'll tell you what you'll find. You'll find that the women's group is twice as large, twice as enthusiastic, twice as productive. In fact, if you have something in the church that has to get done, you give it to the women. The truth is, we don't associate religion and dad as a society.
Amen.
As you've been looking at Father's Day literature this week, have you found any cards or articles with scriptural references in them? About the closest thing you might find religiously that's connected to Father's Day is something like, "Honor thy father, give him Old Spice." Why is this the case? Why don't we associate fathers with religion? Has such a credibility gap been created between reality and what the book of Proverbs admonished? That the father is the voice of God in the family? Well, we don't associate Father's Day with the church because we don't associate father with the church. Let's be brutally candid. The American father is the world's most competent breadwinner. He makes himself a constant candidate for a coronary by the sheer desperate scramble to provide his family with greater material benefits. There's no shortage of dads that work hard for their family. He gives his children everything they need except what they need most. Oftentimes, it's him, a father. Now, we know something today. We know that the world has a very different viewpoint than God has. Isn't that right? Amen. And there's something else that I believe. I believe that God really, really, really wants to reestablish the role of the father in the home, in the family, and in the church.
Amen.
See, I think one of Satan's biggest lies is that religion is only for women and sissies.
Amen.
That we men should be out there spending our time doing other things, outdoorsy things, sports, recreation, relaxing, instead of learning about the things of God. That's what our world tells us. Our world tells us that church, what was it? The opiate for the masses, right? Just something to make us feel good, but not something that has any real meaning, especially for dads. Why is it so important that we reconnect with the one true Hall of Fame dad, God?
Amen.
It's because our family needs us. Here's some quick stats. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes.
Wow.
90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes. 85% of all children who show behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes. 85% of all youths in prison come from fatherless homes.
Wow.
And fatherless boys and girls are twice as likely to drop out of high school, twice as likely to end up in jail, 4 times more likely to need help for emotional or behavioral problems.
Wow.
See, these are scary numbers.
Amen.
And they won't get any better until the church can start the revolution of reconnecting fathers to the ultimate father.
Hallelujah.
You know, being a dad is a different role today than it was in earlier generations. And in most households today, dad is called upon to play a lot more of a nurturing role than they were earlier in perhaps our parents' or grandparents' generation. Earlier roles nurturing roles, caring for children, and oftentimes mom works outside of the home. So dad has to take sometimes a more active role, an equal role in doing household chores. I recently saw this whole campaign on Facebook about the public bathrooms, men's bathrooms, building diaper changing tables in them, because the whole thing is dads change diapers too, and that's become a way more significant role of fatherhood than it certainly was in the last 50 to 100 years.
Amen.
The most common image that Jesus used in describing God was that of a father. And it makes me think that his earthly father, Joseph, must have been a very special kind of dad. You know, we often center most of our attention around Mary, his mother, obviously so. She was chosen. She was ordained. She was the only one in history to ever get pregnant without, doing anything to cause her pregnant. Mary was special. Joseph was there too. And Joseph was visited by God as well. An angel came to reassure Joseph. And Joseph was a good guy. He didn't let Mary suffer the embarrassment of being an unwed mother. Joseph stayed with her. He trusted God. Joseph was a good guy. We don't really talk much about Joseph, mainly because he just kind of silently disappears from Scripture after Jesus' 12th birthday. We don't know what happened to him. Joseph surely combined those very special qualities of strength and gentleness that we associate with Jesus. Jesus learned fatherhood not just from God, but also from his earthly father example. Jesus had a very keen knowledge of the Old Testament Scripture. In the Jewish home, it was the father who had the primary responsibility for his son's religious instruction. Of course, we know that Jesus had a very unique relationship with God, the Father, but we have to believe that Joseph, though barely mentioned in the Gospel, was probably an influential role for Jesus as well. Why else would Jesus have chosen the imagery of Father to portray God? Why would he have taught us to address God as Abba, Daddy? My guess is that Jesus had a wonderful relationship with both his earthly father and his heavenly Father.
Amen.
The same kind of wonderful relationship that he had with his mother. Now, someone is always quick to say, well, Joseph wasn't his real father. And as far as I'm concerned, there are many dads who are not biological dads, who function more as a real dad than many biological dads have. Today, we honor all the men in our congregation who put in the time, the love, and instruction to be a dad to a young person, regardless of whether or not they have a blood relationship or not. The same thing is true for the women. Some of the greatest moms in the world are not biologically related to the children they love and influence.
Amen.
Some may be a grandmother, an aunt, or a stepmom, or whatever. And these moms substitute. These mom substitutes are the child's real mom, just as some men who are biologically related to their, not biologically related to their children's real dad. So we ask the question today, what does it take to be a Hall of Fame father? I think we should begin with perhaps the most difficult attribute of a Hall of Fame dad, and that is time. Years ago, Dr. Charlie Shedd held a contest called One Neat Dad, and he asked contestants to send in letters recommending their dad for this great honor. The number one attribute that young people put at the top of their list was that they should appreciate, what they appreciate their dad was this, that he takes time for me. Interesting. Now, there were other qualities listed. He listens, he plays with me, invites me to go places with him, he helps me, he lets me help him Here's a biggie. He treats my mother well. He lets me say what I think. He's nice to my friends. He only punishes me when I deserve it. Number 10 is he was not afraid to admit he was wrong. How did you do on that pop quiz? Get it? Pop quiz? Especially the first one, time. Do we take the time that our kids need, that the people in our lives need? Now, I'm talking dads generically, but we're all called to have the role of a father to people in our lives. It may be someone we work with. It may be someone that God has placed in our life that we're there to be called to mentor, to love, to care for, to instruct, to guide. Dr. Seymour Diamond did some research on family problems, and he came up with conclusions that provide a glimpse of the problems in many homes. He claims that today's average American father gives undivided attention to his children only 38 seconds per day. Just 38 seconds of undivided attention. He does give them partial attention for an additional 20 minutes while he's otherwise engaged, watching TV, playing on his phone, working on some project. See, that's a problem for both our sons and our daughters. Perhaps, I think more so for our sons. Many people believe that there's confusion among young men today about what it means to actually be a man. In his book, Healing the Masculine Soul, Gordon Dalby suggests a reason for this. He says that too many of these young men grew up in a masculine vacuum. They grew up with fathers who were non-nurturing, uncommunicative, or absent most of the time. This left them in a literal no man's land of confusion about how to express authentic maleness. Think of the many single moms today who are struggling to bring up their son without an appropriate role model. See, this is why the church is so important. Let me tell you guys something today. I am really grateful for each one of you here. Each one of you here, both the men and the women. See, I am grateful for the influence that you guys have on the children in this church. You know, we have kids in this church that are active, and they love God, and they love to worship God. It's evident everywhere you see. I mean, these kids will do anything we ask them to. Think about it. Why? Because they're cared for, they're nurtured by people, wonderful people who don't shoo them away, don't push them out of the way, or give them dirty looks when they cry, or when they're too loud during service. They're invited, included, and actually celebrated in this family. It's awesome. I love it. You include these kids in your life. And let me tell you something incredible that maybe no other church can claim. Each member of our youth group contributes to the service of this church. Each and every one. Our decorations above us, all made by hand by the members of the youth group. We have upcoming musicians that are learning how to lead worship by actually leading worship. It's incredible. We have acolytes. Acolytes that wear funny robes and walk in carrying strange objects to serve the table. Why? Because they want to. Because they like it. We have teens that will help run the computer during service at a moment's notice. Kids that are active in their faith, all because you guys give them a chance. What a blessing. You give them the time to be used by God. See, I think that's the first attribute for being a Hall of Fame dad. Making time for the kids. Being there for them as they grow and as they mature. But here's a second attribute. A Hall of Fame dad makes certain that his children know the difference between right and wrong. Am I the only person concerned about the moral downward slide of our society? I know I'm a pastor and I'm supposed to be concerned about such things, but we are very quickly becoming an anything-goes type of society, particularly with regard to sexual morality. And we wonder why our families are coming apart at the seams. I know there are many influential people in our society who no longer believe that there are absolute values, which is absurd. I bet each of us would become a convert to an absolute standards of conduct if there was someone who stole our car, bullied one of our children, or ran off with our spouse. Certainly you would feel then that something sacred had been violated. And you would be right. Notice what our scripture reading for today said. Jesus is talking to his disciples about the Holy Spirit that's to come upon the disciples. And this is what he says about it. He says, I have much more to tell you, more than you can bear now. But when he, the Spirit of truth, comes, he will guide you into all truth. Isn't that a primary characteristic of a Hall of Fame dad? Amen. Leading his children into truth? But what if dad is confused about what is true and what is false? Particularly when there's so much false information in the world today. 3 brothers, ages 12, 8, and 4, were playing outside, a distance from the house, and Dad apparently had a special call that he would yell when it was time to come in. Supper time came, and Dad went out and did his call. Well, the busy boys weren't ready to come in, and they kept playing. Later, Dad called a second time, but yet the boys still did not come. They were having too much fun. The third time Dad did his call, he did it in a much sterner, huffier voice, and that meant he meant business. Well, this time the boys heard it and decided it was time to come in. As they came running in, the 4-year-old passed Dad and said, Dad, we didn't hear you the first 2 times you called. Now, nothing like that ever happens in your house, I'm sure. Of course they heard Dad, or they heard Mom the first 2 times, and of course, Mom and Dad aren't going to make a huge deal out of such a small transgression. But in today's world especially, it is important that we bring up our children as people of character and honor. People who know the difference between right and wrong, and people who tell the truth. See, we're not going to get role models for such upright behavior out of Hollywood or Washington, D.C., are we? If they don't see models of character and morality in our own home, then heaven help them. There was an interesting story on 60 Minutes a few years ago. The park rangers of a South African wildlife preserve were concerned about the slaughter of 39 rare white rhinos in their park. They did a little investigation, and it turned out that the rhinos were not killed by poachers, but rather some juvenile delinquents. Juvenile delinquents in the park that had gotten to these rhinos. Now, who were these juvenile delinquents? A group of teenaged elephants. The story began a decade before when the park could no longer sustain the increasing population of elephants. They decided to kill many of the adult elephants whose young were old enough to survive without them. And so the young elephants grew up fatherless. As time went on, many of these young elephants roamed together in gangs and began to do things that elephants normally do not do. They threw sticks and water at rhinos, started acting like neighborhood bullies. Without dominant males, the young bulls became sexually active, producing excessive testosterone and exhibiting aggressive behavior. A few young males grew especially violent, knocking down rhinos, stepping on them or kneeling on them, crushing the life out of them. In fact, one elephant named Mufato was the gang leader and eventually had to be killed himself. The park rangers theorized that these young, teenage elephants were acting badly because they lacked role models. The solution was to bring in a large male to lead them and to counteract their bully behaviors. So they did. Soon the new male established dominance and put the young bulls in their place. The killing stopped.
Wow.
The young males were mentored and ultimately saved. Now, does that sound familiar to anybody? Do human gangs ever display such behavior? Now, please, we can't blame single moms. They have a tough enough job without being made to feel guilty about their situation, which they may have not had any control over at all. But if we ever needed Christian dads willing to take time for the children and help our boys and girls to understand the difference between right and wrong, it's right now. The world needs us. It's falling apart, but there's still hope. And it lies within us. We need to be the dads who will spend time with our kids and other kids. We need to be the ones to show them by our lives what is right and wrong. And lastly, we need to be the ones to show them how much we love them. See, I love it when I see a young father who's able to express his love physically for his children. Fathers in our parents' and grandparents' generations perhaps were not as comfortable doing that. Comedian Ray Romano, from Everybody Loves Raymond, he was asked in an interview if his parents were funny people, and he remarked that his mother was very creative, But his father was more eccentric. Ray's father loved him, he said, but he did not express that love very easily. Ray remarked, he said, I used to say that if my father had just hugged me once, I would have become an accountant. I wouldn't have needed to do comedy. Of course, some of these fathers of earlier generations expressed their love in other ways, and we know that. When famed baseball player Hank Aaron was just a boy, he learned a powerful lesson about love and sacrifice from his father. Every day, Hank's father would give him a quarter to buy his lunch at school, and Hank knew that his father skipped lunch each day so that he could give his son that quarter. If he ever doubted his father's love for him, that daily quarter would remind him of how much his father would go to provide for his needs. See, there are many ways that a father can communicate his love for his children. I hope those of you who are fathers, who are exploring each and every one of them. I wish we could put up a hall of fame in our church for our fathers and our mothers and our grandfathers and grandmothers and aunts and uncles and foster parents and step-parents and all of you who help mentor the young adults who are having influence on our children. Because you guys do an amazing job. We are truly facing real problems in our society. And I don't know anyone who can make a big enough dent in these problems except those of us who are involved in the lives of the next generation.
Amen.
So let's commit ourselves today. Commit ourselves to being a Hall of Fame dad or a Hall of Fame mom by giving our time, by teaching our children the difference between right and wrong, and most importantly, by showing them the love of Jesus Christ, who showed us how much his Father loves him and how much his Father loves each of us. Amen.
Amen.